Hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. We have got 20 days of broadcasting left in the morning, and I'm going to switch to the afternoons. And my guest, Byron York, I hope he goes with me. You see him on Fox News all the time. He's a contributor at the Washington Examiner, where he writes their morning newsletter. Byron, are you going to be available in the afternoons when I move to Afternoon Drive?
As a resident of Eastern time zone, I'm happy to do any time of day with you.
Well, what's great is that now people on the West Coast will be able to hear Byron York's hot takes every day. Right now, I want to know, what do you think about being a night watchman at any of the Assad weapons factories or their naval yard overnight? Because the Israelis have launched more than 1,000 strikes, 300 airstrikes in one night, and they destroyed the Syrian Navy last night in a chemical weapons factory. It just basically, if you're with the regime, you want to book away from whatever your job is.
Yeah, I think I would call in sick from now on, as a matter of fact. But this does, to be a little non-serious, this does give you the feeling of the final scene of the original Godfather, that
yes,
Israel continues to settle family business. And this is an opportunistic thing, obviously, with the fall of Assad, but clearly they had been prepared to do something like this for quite a while.
Well, they're prepared. We are not. I got to read to you the first paragraph of a Washington Post story this morning by a group of reporters named Karen DeYoung, Michael Birnbaum, and Missy Ryan. First paragraph, quote, "Of all the foreign upheavals that the Biden administration has had to confront and manage in recent years, Syria was not on anyone's list of likely crises," close quote. Now, that strikes me as odd, given that they've had a civil war for 13 years and 15,000 different armed groups in the country. Do you really think they had no idea this was coming?
Yes. Look, with Joe Biden, you always have to go back to what Robert Gates said about him being wrong on every major foreign policy issue of the previous 4 decades. Now, by the way, Gates said that 10 years ago, so we should update that to previous
5 decades. Yep.
And so so even before there were any issues of senility or being physically or mentally up to the job of President of the United States, Biden just had bad judgment. And I was thinking about this the other day. I mean, the Democratic Party rejected Biden for the presidency for 40 years until the bizarre circumstances of the 2020 election. And voters knew. I mean, they knew all that time that even though Biden was deeply ambitious, he wanted to be president since he arrived in Washington in the 1970s, they just knew he wasn't going to be a good president. And all these weird things happened in 2020, and darn if he doesn't end up the Democratic nominee out of this long selection process.
And we've got exactly what Robert Gates predicted. They have had disaster after disaster for 4 years. I want to read to you a post this morning by Lucas Tomlinson, one of your colleagues at Fox News. Lucas writes, "Biden on Sunday. Our approach has shifted the balance of power in the Middle East. Biden and Netanyahu after the Israeli forces killed Hezbollah's top military commander. Quote, Bibi, what the blank? 12 hours later, Israel assassinated Hamas's senior leader in Tehran. Quote, the perception of Israel around the world is increasingly that you're a rogue state, a rogue actor," Biden yelled at Netanyahu, Bob Woodward writes in his book, War. So Biden's just been wrong about everything, and Israel's been right about everything, except they were unprepared on 10/7.
Yeah, when Biden basically takes credit for Israel's achievements in the Middle East, saying, our approach has reshaped the Middle East, and I think Israel said, yeah, we took everything you said to do and did the opposite, and so far, so good.
I got to say, I don't know Ben Rhodes. I've never met Ben Rhodes. Ben Rhodes is the architect of the Grand Obama theory of making Iran powerful so that the Middle East could be stable. Do you think anyone from Team Obama is available for quotes about how their grand design is in complete shambles right now?
No, I imagine not. But I mean, it's just one truly tragic thing is that Donald Trump had made so much progress in the Middle East in his years as president by just trying something new, which was basically to take the Israeli-Palestinian conflict away from just the absolute central super focus of the Mideast policy and try to build relations between other Middle Eastern states and Israel with the goal of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel, which was close to happening, further marginalizing the Palestinians. So, I mean, there was real progress going on in an area where a lot of people like me didn't think any progress was even possible. And then Biden comes in, goes back to this make Iran powerful position, gives Iran just untold amounts of money, which it uses to cause terrible damage throughout the Middle East, specifically in Israel. And it just all goes to hell. So the work is going to have to start again on January 20th.
No, I am confident that the people that they are bringing, Marco Rubio, a Sec State, Christopher Landau, who was our ambassador to Mexico, is going to be the Deputy Secretary of State. In fact, they announced a couple of other appointments yesterday that I love. Harmeet Dillon is going to take over the office of the Division of Civil Rights at Justice, which is the hammer on all of the colleges that are tolerating anti-Semitism. And then Mark Paoletta is going back to OMB with Russ Vogt, and they're going to go back to doing what they did before, which is employing OIRA, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, to just completely eviscerate the regulatory state. I like these second-tier appointments. They're not getting a lot of attention, but they're all killers.
Yeah, I want to emphasize what David Drucker said before, which is the huge factor here is that Trump has been president before. He has experienced this before, and he has screwed up before, and he is running a vastly better transition this time around. So much so that when you have a failing Joe Biden, I think there are a lot of Republicans, probably a lot of independents who would like to see Trump become president earlier than January 20th, but it's in the Constitution, can't do it. But he is running doing a vastly better job of staffing his administration as he goes into it than he did in 2016, 2017.
I agree. Yesterday on the commentary podcast, John Podhoretz opened by saying, Lloyd Austin and the rest of the cabinet ought to send the 25th Amendment letter because it doesn't look like the president is really competent. Do you agree with that assessment?
Well, I think this is a terrible situation. It was 42 days yesterday, so 41 days now, just slightly under 6 weeks that Joe Biden is still president. We've seen a foreign policy crisis come out of nowhere. Who could have expected it? Just in the last few days, there could be many other terrible things. The Biden administration, to the degree that it's doing anything, seems to be set upon Trump-proofing Biden's policies, that is, tying the new president's hands before he gets into office, which is not a particularly constructive thing to do. So it's a terrible situation. And by the way, I went back. There's been a lot of conversation in the past about moving up Inauguration Day again. Until 1933, Inauguration Day was March the 4th, which is a very long transition period. And then in 1933, amid the emergency of the Great Depression, it was moved to January 20th. It's in the 20th Amendment. So to move it up earlier would require another constitutional amendment, and not sure that's entirely necessary. But clearly, Trump seems to be ready to assume the presidency about now, and Biden certainly seems ready to leave right now.
President Macron of France and Prince William of England certainly treated him like the head of state when he was in Paris.
They did.
And it's not going to change. He is, in effect, he's speaking for the United States when he speaks now. Byron, in terms of all the appointees that have been put forward, I think now, based on the Cotton series of posts yesterday, they're all going to get confirmed. What do you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree with that. As when Senator Cotton came out and said that, I thought that was I paid a lot of attention to that. Clearly, Pete Hegseth turned a corner last week. I would say a week ago today, on Tuesday, he was not looking good. And I believe on Wednesday he did the Megyn Kelly podcast, began to fight back himself. I think he realized that if his nomination was going to be saved, he needed to do it himself. And he has. So I think even though Joni Ernst is still speaking a little cryptically, I think that one's going to be okay.
Hey, stand by for a second, Byron. Back with Byron York. Byron, I wanted to ask you about J.D. Vance's trip to North Carolina. It seems to me that Trump has what Biden did not have for 4 years, which is a reliable backup quarterback. I mean, you can send J.D. Vance to North Carolina, to the mountains, and he connects and he makes sense and he delivers a coherent speech. He doesn't cackle. He doesn't laugh. He tells a joke when he needs to. What do you make of the Vance effect in this transition?
Yeah, well, first of all, kudos to Vance and to the Trump team for sending Vance to North Carolina, to putting a spotlight on the continuing suffering in North Carolina as a result of these storms. I can't even remember how long it's been, but it's been way too long for people to be living in tents in the snow as they are. So kudos to them for recognizing this problem. And clearly, when Trump chose Vance, and I think in the end it came down to Doug Burgum versus Vance, which was really kind of a generational choice and just a sort of two different worldviews. I think when he chose Vance, he chose, one, a more energetic approach to the vice presidency, and two, someone who could actually be seen as a successor to Donald Trump, which is kind of amazing because we always think of Donald Trump as pretty much concerned with himself. But he actually has set up a situation where if President Trump, does well and Vice President Vance does well, then there could be this succession after Trump's one term. So, but the big thing is here, thank you to them for paying attention to the substance of this matter, that is the suffering after these storms in North Carolina.
I agree. The last question about J.D. Vance. When Richard Nixon was tapped by Ike to be his vice president in 1952, a young Richard Nixon was then, like J.D. Vance, 2 years into the Senate, and he got sent by Ike on a 53-day, 17-nation tour of Southeast Asia. Now, travel was different then, but do you expect J.D. to be dispatched, the vice president to go wherever Donald Trump does, and do a lot of it in the first year to get smart about the world?
Well, I think that the good thing when the vice president is perceived as being close to the president and actually speaking for the president, obviously his value is increased all around the world.
Yep. And
so this is not just, if it's perceived as busy work for a vice president they don't really know what to do with, well, that's no good. But if it is perceived as, I am here, President Donald Trump is one man, he can only be in so many places, and he wants me to come speak to you, that'd be very valuable.
And I think he is doing that, and more of that to come. Byron York of the Washington Examiner and Fox News. Follow him on X at Byron York. Thank you, Byron. Have a great one.
Thank you, Hugh.